if you're 60 years old and you've got less than $100,000 saved for retirement, I want you to hear this. A man I know was 62 with $68,000 saved. Divorce had wiped out everything he'd built in his 40s. Years of raising kids alone on one income had taken care of the rest. Today, he has a real retirement plan, a funded one, with a clear number, a clear timeline, and no more dread sitting on his chest every morning. And what he did, the actual steps in the actual order, is exactly what I'm going to walk you through today. Because if you're in that spot right now, the worst thing you can do is nothing. Every year you wait costs more than you think. Every year you act buys more than you'd expect. Let me show you. I ran into Hank at a hardware store on a Saturday morning, about 2 years ago now. We'd worked together for almost a decade. Same operations department, different divisions. Good man. Sharp, reliable, the kind of guy who always knew how things worked and got them done without making noise about it. We hadn't crossed paths in a couple of years. So we grabbed coffee at the diner next door. We caught up on the usual things, and then I asked him how retirement was treating him. He looked at his cup, said, "I'm coping. Still working, actually." The way he said it told me right away it wasn't because he loved the work. So I asked him what was going on. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "The divorce took everything, Ed." He'd gone through it in his mid-40s, right in what should have been his peak saving years. The settlement split the retirement accounts down the middle. The family home went with it. And then there were the kids. Full custody, which he'd fought for and won, and never regretted for a single day. But raising two teenagers alone on one income left nothing over. He'd bought a modest 3-bedroom a couple of years after the divorce, needed the space for the kids. But the kids were grown and gone now, and Hank was still in that house. No room to save. Just years of keeping it together and telling himself he'd figure the rest out later. And then later arrived. I knew Hank wasn't unusual. There are men all across America sitting in exactly that spot. Divorce in their 40s, years of rebuilding, responsibilities that didn't leave room for a retirement plan. Now looking at the calendar and wondering whether it's too late. So I asked him what he had saved. He looked at the table, then said, "Maybe 45,000, give or take." He was 62. I didn't flinch because I already knew something Hank didn't. And what I told him next, that's where things started to shift. The first thing I said was this: "You don't actually know your real number yet." Here's what I mean. The number a man carries in his head is almost always worse than the number on paper. When it lives in your head, it's a fog. Heavy and shapeless. When it's on paper, it's a fact, and facts you can work with. So I told Hank to go home and log into every account, every 401k from every job he'd ever held, every IRA, every savings account. Write the real number down. He called me 2 days later. Turns out there was an old 401k from a company he'd left in his early 50s that he'd completely forgotten about. The real number was 68,000. 23,000 more than he thought. A different starting line than the one he'd been dreading. So that's step one. This week, find your real number. Own it. Then move on to what you can actually do about it. Now, here's where most men in Hank's situation lose serious ground without knowing it. When I told Hank this next part, he genuinely didn't know it existed. If you're 50 or older and you have a 401k at work, the IRS lets you contribute more than the standard limit. It's called the catch-up contribution. And here's what that means in real money. The standard limit for most workers is $23,500 a year, but once you hit 50, you can throw in an extra $7,500 on top of that. That's $31,000 a year going into a tax-advantaged account. As of early 2026, those numbers haven't changed. And if you're between 60 and 63, it gets better still. The government added what's called a super catch-up a couple of years back. Instead of the standard $7,500 extra, you can contribute $11,250 extra, which means your total potential is $34,750 a year. Most people can't max that out, but the question isn't whether you can hit the ceiling. The question is whether what you're currently contributing can go up, even by 3%, even by 5%. Hank had been contributing 6% for years, just enough to capture the employer match. After our conversation, he bumped it to 15. Tighter month to month, yes, but the math over the next 6 years looked completely different. And one more thing here. If you're doing any kind of consulting or part-time work, there's a retirement account called a SEPIRA that lets you contribute up to 25% of what you earn from that work, up to $69,000 in 2025. And that figure hasn't been revised for 2026 yet. If that applies to you, it's worth a conversation with a tax person. Now, this next move is the one that surprised Hank the most, because it doesn't require saving a single additional dollar. It's Social Security timing. And I want to be direct about this because the decision of when you claim is one of the most expensive choices a man in his 60s will ever make. And most men make it without understanding what it actually costs them. If your full retirement age is 67, which it is for most Americans born after 1960, and you claim Social Security at 62, your monthly benefit is permanently reduced by about 30% every month for the rest of your life. For every year you delay past 67 up to age 70, your benefit grows by about 8%. So the difference between claiming at 62 versus waiting until 70 is as much as 77% more per month. With cost of living adjustments on top of that, every year, for as long as you live. For a man behind on savings, a larger guaranteed monthly check is one of the most powerful tools available. Because every dollar coming in from Social Security is a dollar you don't have to pull from savings, which means your savings last longer, which means the math that looked impossible starts looking manageable. The Social Security Administration has a free tool called My Social Security at ssa.gov. Create an account and you'll see exactly what your monthly benefit looks like at 62, 67, and 70. Takes 15 minutes, and worth every one of them. Hank had always assumed he'd claim at 62. When he saw the actual numbers side by side at 62 versus 67, he changed his plan on the spot. Several $100s more per month, every month, for the rest of his life, just by waiting 5 years. Now here's the move that makes most men uncomfortable when I bring it up. The house. After the divorce, Hank had bought a modest 3-bedroom to raise his kids in. Good decision at the time. But the kids had been gone for years. He was rattling around in that house alone. 3 bedrooms, a yard, heating bills on rooms nobody used. And meanwhile, all of that equity was just sitting there doing nothing for his retirement. Downsizing is strategy. Home values in most parts of America right now are strong. If Hank sold that 3-bedroom and moved into a smaller 2-bedroom or a well-located condo, He was looking at freeing up somewhere between $100 to $20,000 and $150,000 in equity, depending on what he bought. That's more than double his entire retirement savings in one move without a single extra paycheck. And the savings don't stop at the equity. Smaller home means lower property taxes, lower insurance, lower utilities, lower maintenance. Every dollar he wasn't spending on a house he didn't need stayed in his pocket. There are genuinely affordable places to live across America, smaller cities, college towns, parts of the South and Midwest, where a dollar goes significantly further than in a major metro. Men who make that move deliberately often find their retirement picture changes faster than they expected. Hank sat with this one for a while. There was real identity wrapped up in that house. The years he'd spent there with his kids, the life it represented. That's real, and I won't pretend it isn't. But eventually he said something that stuck with me. He said, "The kids don't live in that house anymore, Ed. Only the bills do." He listed it 4 months after our conversation in the diner. Now, two more things, and I'll move through these quickly. Transportation is the big expense most men overlook. A second vehicle, like insurance, registration, maintenance, fuel, runs $400 to $600 a month in most parts of the country. That's up to $7,000 a year. Over 10 years of retirement, that's $70,000. Some households genuinely need two vehicles, but a lot don't, and haven't seriously asked. So, ask. And while you're at it, spend one afternoon shopping your insurance, car, home, call 3 carriers and compare. Men often find they've been overpaying for years simply because they never got around to looking. Savings from one afternoon of phone calls redirected to your retirement account every month quietly becomes something real over time. And the last step, working a little longer or picking up part-time work on your own terms. Hear me out before you skip past this. Every additional year you work does 4 things at once. You're contributing to savings. You're leaving savings untouched. You're potentially growing your Social Security benefit. And you're shortening the number of years your savings needs to cover. One extra year of work is doing 4 jobs simultaneously. And for men who spent careers in operations, logistics, engineering, healthcare, construction, finance, consulting work is often available. Project-based, part-time, your expertise, your schedule, your rate, even $1,500 to $2,000 a month in consulting income applied directly to savings changes the trajectory in ways that are hard to overstate. 6 months after our conversation in that diner, Hank had a consulting arrangement with a smaller company that needed exactly what he knew. 2 days a week, $1,800 a month. Every dollar went into his IRA. He wasn't in love with working, but he was in love with what it was doing to his financial picture. Hank is doing all right now. Better than all right. Real number found. Contributions bumped. Consulting 2 days a week, smaller home. Social Security plan locked in. He's going to retire with a real income and a clear plan. Without the dread that was sitting on his chest every morning before we had that conversation. That's what's available, even from here, even now. So here's what I want you to do this week. Go to ssa.gov and pull up your My Social Security account. See what your benefit looks like at 62, 67, and 70. Log into every retirement account and find your real number. Look at your 401k contribution and ask honestly whether it can go up. And if the house conversation has been sitting on the back burner, it's time to put it on the front one. You don't need a perfect plan, you need a real one. And you can build it starting this week. And if today helped, share this with the man you know who needs to hear it. Because a lot of guys are sitting in Hank's spot right now. And sometimes the right information at the right moment is what finally gets a man moving. You might be the one who puts it in front of him. And if you're not already part of this channel, come join us. Because what we do here isn't a lecture series. It's what happens when guys who've actually lived this sit down and get honest about it. Real experience, real mistakes, real wins, and what this life actually looks like when you're finally living it on your own terms. Hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. See you in the next one.